She's the only one prepared.
And notice how she made sure that we all knew it. I was prepared.
I want a gold star.
Okay, let's get started. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. Yay, we're so excited. I am Bella Banta. I have a book coming out with tour in fall 2026, which is why I'm here. It's called The Court of Venus. I have bookmarks. I'll give you one. Give you all. But what we're here today is to talk about four of, I think, like the most talented authors working today in the fantasy space. And we're so excited to have them talk about their books today. So just some really quick author bios. Carissa Broadbent is the #1 New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of the Crowns of Nyaxia series. She's been featured in Elle and Publishers Weekly, and her books have been reviewed in Library Journal, Mary Claire, Pop Sugar, and Vulture, among others. She writes novels that blend epic fantasy plots with a heaping dose of romance. Thank God. She lives with her husband, her son, and one perpetually skeptical cat in Rhode Island. Oh yeah, I'm glad we have the books. Tricia Levenseller is the #1 New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of The Darkness Within Us and several other YA romantasy novels, including Daughter of the Pirate King. Tricia grew up in Oregon, where she spent her childhood climbing trees and playing make-believe. She now lives in Utah with her bossy dog, Rosie, where she writes full-time. When she's not writing or reading, Tricia enjoys putting together jigsaw puzzles, playing video games, and finding tasty restaurants to frequent. What Fury Brings is her debut novel for adults. Maddie Martinez was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She has a BA in Political Science from Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, and an MA in International Peace and Conflict Resolution from American University in Washington, D.C. You can now find Maddie in New York City, filling her tiny apartment with an unwieldy number of books. The Maiden Under Monster is her first novel and was an instant USA Today bestseller. Sarah Beth Durst is the New York Times bestselling author of over 25 books for adults, teens, and kids, including Cozy Fantasy, The Spell Shop. She's been awarded an American Library Association Alex Award, as well as a Mythopoeic, wow, that word is tough, Mythopoeic.
She does it on purpose.
Fantasy award. You would think I'm a writer, like I would know how to say things. Several of her books have been optioned for film and television, including Drink, Say, Love, which was made into a TV movie and was a question on Jeopardy! She lives in Stony Brook, New York with her husband, her children, and her ill-mannered cat. I like the number of pets on this cat.
And they're all cranky. Yes. That is true.
So we're here to discuss romantasy. I don't know about any of you, but I feel like I've been reading romantasy my entire life. And now it's kind of become this really exciting kind of buzzword in publishing. I would love to hear how each of you kind of define it, and have you felt like you've always been writing it, or is it just kind of something that you're new to? And if you've written other kinds of fantasy, how are you approaching romantasy in particular?
I need you to tell us who's starting. I don't like the awkward silence.
Yeah, let's go.
Trisha, thanks so much for volunteering.
I was just being assertive.
Do you want to start, Tricia?
I'd be happy to. Since you asked. Amazing. So this is my 9th book. My 8 other books I would definitely call YA romantasy, even though we didn't really have that term before. For me, romantasy means that it is either the main plot or a very strong secondary subplot that carries throughout the book, in which the main characters do not get together until the very end, and it is absolutely crucial that there is a happily ever after between the main couple. Was there another question besides my definition?
Well, also just if you've written, I guess, like I'd love to hear actually about in particular, your transition from YA to adult.
Sure. So I held off. I actually got the idea for this book years ago, but I held off because the adult fantasy shelves was a sausage fest. And for some reason, if you write books if you're a fantasy author and you're a woman, you get shelved in YA because women write for children, but men can write for adults, right? That is the way we have perceived female fantasy writers. And I was like, ooh, I'm too stubborn to use a male pseudonym for my debut adult book because I did all the work. I don't want to put a man's name on the book. So I put off writing this book for a really long time until a few things happened. Number one, we finally had some authors blow up. You know, we had Sarah J. Maas, we had JLA, we had Rebecca Yarros, we had some really big names, so that we were finally recognized. And they're like, oh, I guess some women can write for adults too. I guess we will allow them into the adult fantasy section in the bookstore. And then furthermore, we started branding these romantasy so that we could know the distinct line between the mantasy and the romantasy, as I like to call it. Anyway, so once that divide finally happened, I was like, okay, now is the time. I pitched the idea to my editor, and she was like, yeah, great, let's do it. So it was really just a matter of waiting until I felt like I wouldn't scar 13-year-olds anymore. And waiting for us to welcome women into spaces they think are only allowed for men. Oh, thank you.
What about you, Sarah? Because I feel like you also have written for a lot of different age groups, and then these kind of are cozy romantasies. How did you approach that?
It's just like writing about stuff, talking that shouldn't talk. I don't really care what age I'm writing for, so long as I get to have cool magic. Yeah, so I'm in the cozy corner of romantasy. I'm the friends to better friends at Kiss. And my books, so Spell Shop and Greenhouse, and the next one is called Sea of Charms, and it's got a really funny cover. I'm very excited. They're about ordinary people getting a second chance at defining who they are and finding happiness. And to me, that is very much about finding a way to not be alone, whether it's with found family or whether it's romantically. And I did both. I'm like, I want it all. I want them to find the family that makes them feel like they are the best selves that they can be and feeds them lots of baked goods and stuff, because that's very important to me. I basically wrote these books by sitting down and saying, what makes me happy? And then just put it all in there. So it's all like spell books and found family and cinnamon rolls and cheese and raspberry. Like, there's a lot of food. Like, so food makes me very happy. So for me, the romance part of it is just another step on the journey to figuring out who you are and what your place is in the universe. So it's not that I said, I want to write a romance. I was like, I want to write a book with a talking plant, was probably much more accurate. But it was part of the character's emotional journey. So that's why I'm in the romantasy world now.
I always thought it was funny when Sarah and I were, so our first books with Bramble, like, were kind of coming out like around the same time.
Around the same time.
So we were doing like a lot of promotional activities together, and I was talking about The Serpent and the Wings of Night, which is about like vampires killing each other in a gladiatorial match to the death.
So good.
And Sarah was just like, I wanted to write something with like food and like falling in love and like all of the good feelings, and I was like, I wanted to inflict as much pain as really possible. We really were like the meme with like the two houses.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been very happy to see romantasy become like a mainstream thing, but I really think, like we've said in the beginning, that it's been around for a long time. It's just it wore different names and had different faces. I think, am I the only one here who is hybrid, meaning partly independently published?
I think so.
Right?
So, yeah.
So I found what Tricia was talking about to be very interesting, because part of the
You
reason,
didn't have that problem.
well, but
Or
part
did
of the,
you?
part of the reason I didn't query this book when it was initially independently published in 2020 is because back in like 2019, when I was making these decisions, I thought for sure that if I queried it, I would be asked to age it down to young adults, and I really did not want to do that. So romantasy, I mean, to be fair to the publishing industry, I actually don't know if that would have happened because I didn't do it. So, because I'm a wimp, I'm a baby, that is why I didn't query. But it was so interesting to see. I always knew the readership for what we now call romantasy. It was there and very enthusiastic. And yeah, like sometimes they were adults who were reading young adult because that's where those stories were generally happening. Or sometimes they were reading in independent publishing, in self-publishing, which is where like I was finding my readership at that time. But I feel like the appetites are very much there. And it's a big frustration to me, like Tricia said, that somehow there being a presence of romance in what is otherwise very much an epic fantasy plot somehow makes it like a separate thing for the ladies, you know, which, not to say that romantasy is only for women. Of course, there is lots of romantasy aimed at people of all genders, and all types of romantic relationships. But it's pretty fantastic that at least we have a label for it and a way to like kind of easily find and surface these stories, and it's been really exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, I think my first introduction to Romantasy was in the indie space, and I think it was much more of a defined genre in the indie space, if I could say that. I remember reading Danielle Jensen and like while she was still indie pub, and that's like where I was like, okay, this is different in that it feels like the romance and the plot are in equal measure, and that you can't have one without the other. And I thought that created a really interesting environment because I've been a lifelong fantasy reader, and romance kind of took me a little bit more time to get into. And so I really liked that introduction. And one of the reasons why I love writing romantic subplots is I really love like the art of subtle yearning and like putting characters in these horrific fantasy situations and making them get feelings for the worst person they could ever possibly fall in love with. And I think that creates like such a great addition to a book, a subplot. And yeah, I think it's, like I said, it's always been there, and I think we define it a bit more broadly now. But I think people have always loved subplot romances in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I have a question that jumps right off of that. So
You're welcome.
Well, because all of your world building, whether it is kind of epic or cozy, is I think just really spectacular. And I would love to hear everyone talk a little bit more about how they approach their fantasy world building. Does that start with your love interest? Do the love interests come kind of as part of the journey? Because, I mean, to me, there's nothing as good as like an epic quest where you're falling in love along the way, but like, that is not always how a book forms. So I would love to hear everyone talk more about that.
I love world building. I was a kid, like, okay, I decided I wanted to be a writer when I was 10 years old, right? Before that, I didn't know like humans wrote books, like just something that popped on the screen. And I had never met a writer, I had no idea how to begin. So I assumed that what I had to do to begin to be a writer is grab all the scrap paper in the house, tape it together, draw a huge map, and then people with magical powers of talking animal sidekicks. So I'm like, that was step one. So I have been world building for a very long time, and I love doing it. If any of you out there have not tried making your own world, you totally should, even if you don't write a story about it or whatever, just like, I don't know, build it in your daydreams. It's so much fun. The way I always approach it is I make one decision. Just one decision, like the plant will talk, for instance. And then you just start asking it questions, like, okay, if this is true, what is the most awesome thing that also has to be true? Okay, if those two things are true, what is the most awesome thing that also has to be true? And you can build an entire world that way, and the beauty of doing that, A, it's fun, and B, you end up with something that's grown organically and is cohesive. And the reason you want your world when you build it to be, I really like world building, sorry. The reason you want your world to be cohesive is you're trying to cast a spell with the reader. You're trying to take them out of whatever is hurting them and upsetting them in their lives and pull them into this shared dream with you. And you don't want to ever do anything that's going to toss them out and make them go, So you want a cohesive world so that the promise you're making them never gets broken, so that that spell remains around them and they can live inside their world, your world, and hopefully carry it with them wherever they go. So, I like that.
I think for The Maiden and Her Monster, for The Maiden and Her Monster, I think it was an interesting situation where already the romance went in place. So it's about a girl who ventures into this cursed forest to find the monster that's been killing the girls of her village. And the monster she finds is not who she expects, and she strikes a bargain with her to turn herself in, but if and only if she helps this monster on her own quest first. And what happens when you start to fall for the person who their death means like this to save your mother and your community and your home, and what a tricky position to be in.
Our books have very different vibes.
We also talk about this. But I think because that was the setup of the book, the romance just felt so natural to have that work in that way. And then also, I just really wanted to write a hot monster in the woods story.
Amazing.
So the combination of those two things went really hand in hand.
I was gonna race you, but you didn't even try. So I guess I won.
I saw you moving, and I was like, it's your time to shine.
No. Golden. I once heard a wise woman say, I cannot remember who it was, I'm sure I'll say it and someone will tell me who it was, but if your hero is a firefighter, then your heroine needs to be an arsonist. And those are words I live by in my romances, because that is going to create the best dynamic possible. What Fury Brings is about a kingdom that has a shortage of men. So if women want husbands, they have to go and kidnap them from neighboring kingdoms and bring them back home downstream. Okay? Now, my main character is in the running to get the throne, to become queen. And in order to prove herself, she's going to kidnap a prince from the enemy kingdom. And she decides she's going to take the second-born prince, who's said to be poetic and docile and obedient, right? But that's no fun. So instead, she by accident takes the crown prince, who's been trained to be a warrior and is very willful. And so that provides the dynamic that I think people want to read in the book. So it's really about who is my main character, and then who's going to provide the most tension in the conflict. And I literally base my love interests around that to make sure that I give you the most tension-filled book possible. You know, if in my book, Daughter of the Pirate King, if he's a neat freak, she's going to be chaos. She's going to smash his room and destroy it, right? It's all about finding those little points of interest to make that kind of conflict, because it gives you guys and us the juiciest read and the most fun writing it, I think. But I'm sure Sarah will disagree with me, because she writes a different kind of story.
I don't do that at all. I write about awkward people that are like really nice.
We're all picking on Sarah because we're writing monsters, kidnapping,
Wait, I'm the palate cleanser.
That's true.
Sarah, I would show we all love Sarah very
Yes,
much.
very much.
I love what Tricia said about conflict, because that's also how I approach world building. I'm like fascinated listening to Sarah, because I low-key hate world building, and when someone says I'm good at it, I'm like, how much have you read? Like, but yeah, I feel like every time I sit down to write any story, the first thing I come up with is theme. Like, what is this going to be about? Like, before the love interest, like sometimes I'll have like a concept, like, oh, this is going to be something vampires, you know, or whatever. But I have a theme, and I'm like, this is kind of the idea that I want to explore with this book. And almost everything blooms out of that, from the romance, like how are these two characters going to be reckoning with this theme, usually in opposite ways. So, you know, a vampire who wishes that he was human, and a human who wishes he was vampire, or like, you know, two people who are grappling with faith in like very different ways. And even the world building often is kind of crafted to just like poke at those things and like pull at them in the most conflict-driven possible way. Because for me, I really admire authors who have world building for the sake of world building, meaning they really have all of the answers of everything in their world. I'm very much not that girl. But I can find those answers usually through that theme. And sometimes I learned with my second series that there's a lot of value in strategically leaving blind spots, meaning I knew I wanted a really big world with tons of possibilities. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stake out the bounds of this huge world. There's going to be a magic system based on these 12 gods. There's going to be this country here, and in our first books, we're looking at this little piece of this little piece of this country. But I know that all this other stuff is over here, and I have some big ideas about all of this conflict that I can draw upon later. But it's like an impressionist painting. Like, we don't have to start doing the detail over there yet. I just know that it's there, and the color is roughly like this, and then we can go explore when I need to. It's controlled chaos, but it is like semi-work for me so far, so.
But I was going to say, Sarah, I feel like you have a grumpy sunshine going on in the spell shop. That kind of causes tension. That's like the arsonist firefighter in smaller dose, right?
yeah, and then they go eat food.
Yeah.
No, I deliberately set out, okay, usually when I start a book, I start with like, an idea. I did not with these. I started with a vibe. I started with how I wanted the readers to feel, and I wanted them to feel like they were being hugged. I wanted them to feel like they're sitting next to their friend with their friend's arm around them saying everything's gonna be okay. And I built it all around that, and one of the choices I made very early on is I really wanted to portray a non-toxic relationship where they would kiss and then like discuss it afterwards. So that was a very deliberate choice I made very early on when I was mapping out my characters, and I do love a grumpy sunshine, and I do love okay, maybe Enchanted Greenhouse doesn't have only one bed, but there's only one cottage.
Yeah, let's actually talk about tropes, because I mean, a lot of authors don't necessarily write to tropes, but when they see the book in the aftermath, they can pick out some things, and some do. So I'm curious, I'm a big forced proximity girly. Does anyone else have some favorite ones that even if you don't write them, do you like reading certain things, certain kind of patterns, tropes?
Well, it's funny you should mention forced proximity, because there is a lot of that, much to the character's detriment in this book. But I think the interesting thing about tropes is that they've always been a part of stories, and that's what made them so popular, is because they're parts of stories that we love and that we're drawn to, and that makes sense for both character growth and plot. And forced proximity, you literally have to get to know them and go through your problems. You have to sit and talk about your feelings because you're literally just stuck together. And a lot of other tropes that we love are situations that have existed in fantasy for a really long time and feel comforting and of the genre. So I think I don't think I really was thinking about tropes while writing this, but you could probably pick out a bunch of them just because it's so intrinsic to fantasy and to creating stories that we love. And also I did start as a fanfic writer, so that definitely made its way in there.
My somewhat controversial opinion about tropes is, okay, so I feel like, have we all been asked about tropes many times? It feels like, yeah, people love talking about tropes in Romantasy. And sometimes they ask them as we were asked right now, which in a positive way. And then sometimes they ask them in this kind of snotty way, in a way that they're kind of like, why do you write such tropey trash? You can totally tell that that's the underlying, oh, why do you think that Romantasy is so tropey? I very firmly believe that tropes are not an ingredient, they are a result. If you truly understand as an author why a trope works, okay, only one bed, forced proximity, or whatever, as a reader, a lot of times you have this intrinsic sense of why this works, why you like it. And I think that when you really understand that, and you're thinking about it from that angle, meaning how do I bring this perfect blend of tension and conflict and desire, which is the reason why we like forced proximity tropes, into a work. It doesn't really matter if there is only one bed, because you're still capturing the lightning in the bottle that makes only one bed work. And once we start to have tropiness as a derogatory term, or a tropiness that, let's say, maybe doesn't land as well as it should, where the reader is reading it and they feel very conscious of oh, this is someone who's trying to stuff every trope. There's kind of I was trying to come up with a noun verb of ingenuineness, ingenuity, not ingenuity, it's the opposite. Not ingenuity.
Disingenuous.
There we go. I'm a writer, guys. I do this for a living. They pay me for this. That readers are going to pick up on, right? Because it feels like you're faking it, you're just, because the foundation beneath that is not working. And on the flip side, if the foundation beneath it is working, then it doesn't really matter if there's a knife to the throat, because you already have all of that tension. It doesn't matter if that particular literal action happens. It's the least important part of the trope. So that's how I feel about it, and I think that they're a great way of labeling what's on the bottle sometimes for the readers who like those things. But as a writer, I try to think of them from the opposite direction.
I love that. I adore tropes. I think people that don't understand, or that look down on tropes, don't understand that all literature is in conversation with all prior literature, and that that's a beautiful thing. As came up before, I do write for all ages, and one of the joys of writing for instance, the middle grade age, ages 8 to 12, is that you're the reader's first. You're their first unicorn, you're their first dragon, their first adventure, first step, and that's lovely. But the fun thing about writing for adults is that you're not their first. They're coming to your book with this whole set of baggage, cultural, emotional, everything they've read before, all of these expectations weighing on them when they come to go on your journey in your book. And you get the choice through how you use the tropes, through how you use the familiar beats of the story, to either fulfill that or totally subvert that. And that's a wonderful tool in the writer's arsenal. So I think an awareness of tropes is important, because then you know how you're playing with the reader's emotional and intellectual reaction to what you've done by exploiting it to its fullest. So I love tropes.
I agree with everything that has been said. I'm trying to decide if I have anything to offer. I think one of the fun things about tropes is subverting them. That's obviously something I do a lot of in this book. I mean, how many captive romances have we read where he kidnaps her? Like, so many. And I was like, but wouldn't it be funny if we kidnapped the big, strong warrior boy? You know, wouldn't that be funny? What if I wrote her as the confident alpha hole? Wouldn't that be funny? So I got to like flip everything in this book, and I think that was really fun. So I love tropes as they are. I love subverting them. I think it's all good. And I don't think we ever set out and be like, I'm going to write this trope. It just makes sense when you get to that point in the story, if you've earned it or not, like Carissa was saying. So, yeah, well said, everyone.
I also, just to add on to trope subversion, I think when you write like queer stories or BIPOC stories, you're automatically subverting the expected tropes that come with that. And whether like that's a conscious choice that you're making or not. And I think that's really special too. And I'm glad that that's increasingly growing.
Yeah. Well, and so a couple folks mentioned tension. How do you work on building tension between your characters? And have you ever been writing something and been surprised by the tension between characters that you might not have planned and had things go in different directions? Or has that not happened to you?
Yes. So one of my more popular YA romantasies is called The Shadows Between Us. Thank you. And in that book, the characters had so much chemistry that I literally had to create a magic system to keep them from getting together too early in the book, which cracked me up. So that is the entire reason why I wrote a shadow daddy, and she can't touch him, otherwise he will lose his shadow powers, because they kept trying to get together too soon, and I was like, no, you need to stop. We're gonna pull you apart here because magic reasons. So yeah, that really surprised me, and I think that's just one example of using world building to further the conflict and further the other elements of your story to make those work.
I opened my mouth and I was like, I had a very thought out answer that just went.
My life.
That's the fun part about writing romantasy, you know? It's like, actually, my favorite part about writing romantasy is that, or writing any kind of a romance, honestly, any relationship in a fantasy setting, is that the potential for tension is so much higher. Like, I love contemporary romance also. This is in no way like shade to contemporary romance, but when I read an enemies to lovers contemporary romance, I'm like, oh, he was mean to you in high school. Like, but did he kill your dad? Like,
did he burn down your kingdom?
Exactly. Is he literally your sworn mortal enemy for generations, and the world will end if you get together with that guy in particular? Like, the stakes are just so much higher, and it lets you play with territory that, like, you know. When I sat down to write the second Crowns of Meraxia book, I was like, I was sitting down and being like, how are these crazy kids gonna make this work? You know, like, in real life, I'd be like, honey, there's plenty of fish in the sea, you know? Like, but you get to like twist the screws in like all of these really fun ways. And to me, I mean, like I said earlier, I am a theme-first writer first. So the conflict between my two leads will almost always be around them kind of exploring the theme through opposite sides, or sometimes in the same way and they don't realize it. Or sometimes some people disagree with this, with the definition of romantasy. But I think that romantasy is a broad enough genre that sometimes the will they, won't they of the main couple does not need to be the main thrust of the story the entire time. So in this series, for example, this is not a spoiler really, but by the end of this book, like this couple, like they are committed to each other, you know? And there's 2 more books after this, and there's a lot of world stuff that keeps them apart, or that gives us some questions as to whether they're going to be able to have a happy ending, you know, together. But their actual relationship is very strong, and I think that there's a lot of value in being able to write those kinds of stories too. And it's very like hopeful for me as an author to be able to write stories where like love really can conquer all, you know, even when like some really abysmal shit is happening, we're still, you know, managing to prioritize love.
I have like no tension in mine. No, I approached mine as wanting to write a story about healing. So there is darkness in this world. I began Spell Shop with burning the library, which I think is like the most horrible thing ever. But they save the books, they do. They get them with their like, you know, plant tendrils in their hands and so forth. It's okay. But I don't know what I was gonna say either. Just escaped. Tension. Thank you. Yes. For me, with cozy fantasy, you know, we're not saving a world. We are saving a heart. We're saving a soul. And so it's a low stakes in terms of like when I was writing the Spell Shop, I'd come into the kitchen for a snack because I cannot write these books without continuously snacking. And my husband would be like, so does it have a plot yet? I'm like, no. We are making jam for a whole chapter. So it's a subgenre that is low stakes but high emotional resonance. And I think I can't write a character without falling in love with them. And for me, just like clinging to their emotional truths as they learn to become whole so that they can be together. That was the arc that I was exploring in these.
I think when I think about tension, I think foils are like a really fascinating way to keep that tension tensioning. And for me, that was creating 2 characters who ultimately both wanted to be protectors, and they both felt like they were failing, but they thought that they would be able to protect in ways that butted heads with the other's interpretation of how they're going to protect. And that often meant that one was frustrating the other. I also loved writing like a 6'5" brooding lesbian who just is grumpy, and that inherently brings like a lot of tension, especially when she's like, what do you mean I'm catching feelings? So that's kind of how I think about it, is like how could these characters interact with each other in terms of them being foils, and how can I make that the most dramatic uncoiling of those foils.
Everyone answered. Didn't I go first?
I think you
Oh, yeah.
Let's only the answer twice.
Okay, so what, I'd love to know just in terms of inspirations, like what made you want to be a writer? Like when you were you all readers as kids? Was there anything that sparked it in particular? Like I'd love to hear more about that journey.
It's the only thing I've ever wanted to do with my life, is write stories. Yeah, I mean, I love that our job, I kind of see it as like there's sort of a sea of awesome in the world, and our job is to try to add a couple more drops, to try to raise that level, to create something that can't exist, yet people will fall in love with. Those books you read as a child, when you close them and you feel like the world is a little more magical than you thought it was, and that you are a little stronger. Fantasy, it's a literature of hope and empowerment, or it can be. I mean, there's some grim, dark stuff that's really, really sad. But it can make you feel like you can face life again. And and that's just what I always wanted to do. And I have, there's one book that I kind of credit for being so formative, Alana by Tamara Pierce. For those of you that haven't read it, and you should, it is about a girl that wants to become a knight in a land where only boys can become knights. And I just have this crystal clear memory of closing that book and thinking to myself, if Alana can become a knight, I can become a writer. I always want to create stories that might give somebody else even just a little shard of hope. So yeah, that's why I write and why I started. And it's all I do. I'm really literally not good at anything else.
I wrote a poem about a girl dying alone in the woods. And teachers called my parents and they're like, woo! I always love that. I'm listening to it and I'm like, oh, that's so nice. Yeah, I feel like I'm curious how many of us are going to say to some degree of like, this is kind of all I've done. Like, I took a brief detour through, cybersecurity. That was super exciting. Lots of vampires there. But it was just so fun to be able to create characters and worlds, and like, I was doing it before I even thought anything of it, like it just always, I don't know. I remember, I went into college for graphic design, again, not anything writing related, and went into my, corporate day job world in cybersecurity. And I was like, oh no, this is it forever. And that's when I kind of picked up writing again, like after doing it in like middle school and elementary school and stuff like that, high school. So I went back to it. And at times, like during my self-publishing career, when I had a day job still, I had a very demanding day job. And it was like, just unbelievable, like stressful. I mean, I was up at 4 o'clock every morning to write before I started work. And there were so many times when I was like, I could just stop. Because like, even like this book, when this book first came out independently published, it sold like 50 copies, like the first month it came. Like I was making like no money, like no one knew who I was. And if I had stopped writing, nobody would have known. No one would have like cared or anything. And there were so many times where I was like, the solution to this problem is so simple, like I should just stop. And I would have this feeling like, but what would I do? Like I just felt like this emptiness, like when I thought about it. So it is like very compelling. It feels very intrinsic. But I also like to also emphasize that by also saying it's also a conscious decision that you make every day. And I want to say that because there are so many people I talk to who are like, oh, I'd love to write a book, but like I'll be honest with you, like a lot of times when I was up at 4:30 in the morning, like at the coffee shop or whatever, I did not want to be there. Like there were times when I was like, this sucks, everything I'm writing sucks. Like, why am I doing this? I am tired and I wish I was in bed right now, and why am I doing this? And I like to emphasize that part because I feel like sometimes people who are not writers have this sense that there's some like spiritual call that you're supposed to feel and it's gonna be like easy all the time. It is not. So yeah, yeah, true, exactly. See, bottle that. So that way, if you are saying to yourself, oh, I'd like to write a book, but it's hard and I don't feel like doing it every day, that means that I'm not supposed to do it. It's not meant to be. That is not true. Like, you should go out and write your book. And just know that sometimes it's just a matter of dragging 500 words out of you. Because that's what it is. 500 words, 200 times. It's a book. So, that's all it is sometimes.
I will be tweeting that later. That's very well said. Oh, sorry. Did you want to go next? I was just being stupid. Okay. So, I have crippling social anxiety, which a lot of people don't believe, but I'm very well medicated and have a great therapist. And so when I was younger in college, when that anxiety was so bad I couldn't leave my house without my body going into fight or flight, writing was a way for me to have a voice in a safe space, right? Because even if I couldn't interact with other people, I could type words into a laptop and they could be just for me and I could feel safe while doing it. And I could feel like I was speaking, I could feel like I was talking about things that mattered. And after, publishing a book and having those words be accepted, I got more confident and I could suddenly start talking about things because I had that experience of being accepted once. They say confidence is gained every time you try something scary and it goes well. That's when your confidence is built. And anxiety comes when you try something and it goes wrong, and then you start going the other way. So when we don't take those chances, we don't have a chance to build ourselves up and go that way. And I learned that, one book at a time, one word at a time. So yeah, I think books are magical in that way. I get to talk to so many people who I otherwise wouldn't have talked to, and share words with people who otherwise never would have had any clue who I was. And I'm still just a shy little girl from a small town, and yet, I'm here now doing things like this. So, yeah, I was going to be snarky and sassy, and that came out instead. So there you go.
Well, I was an angry and violent child.
Amazing. I love it. I love it.
I feel like I was mad at the world and at a lot of things that were happening in my life that were happening way too young, like when I was way too young to feel like I deserved that to be happening. And I felt like ever since my earliest memories, I can remember that, like for a lot of us, reading has always been an escape. Writing has been an escape for me. But also one of the reasons why I love writing dark fantasy with horror elements, and I'd love to write just like straight horror one day, is that I have plans. I have some freaky ideas. Don't worry. But I think that allows you to kind of channel rage, and I know like a lot of us are feeling rage nowadays, especially. And I've always loved to explore the things that I was feeling through a fictional world because it offers that space, but doesn't make it any less cathartic. And then also being able to create and develop the characters who are dealing with the things in this world, a lot of them that are often like way worse than like, what I deal with on a day-to-day. I don't have to worry about like getting boiled alive, really. Don't take that as a challenge. But yeah, so I think it was helpful in allowing me to like channel my rage and my feelings about this harsh world.
Well, thank you all. We're gonna play a really quick game, and then I'm gonna pass it over to audience Q&A. So, you can do the couple in the books in front of you, or you can choose a different book couple, but I just have a couple quick, like, rapid fire questions. What TV show for your couple are they binge watching every night after work? Maddie.
Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah.
Damn, I'm not prepared. Skip me, I'll come back to me.
Okay.
A Good Place.
Yes. I'm gonna also say Interview with the Vampire, but they're like fact checking the whole time. Like it doesn't work like that.
I love that.
It needs to be a female-centric show. They're gonna watch Sweet Vicious. Has anyone seen Sweet Vicious? Oh, yes, one person. Y'all come work, go watch Sweet Vicious. Veronica Mars meets Batman. That's my quick pitch. Okay, keep going.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Okay, who is the better driver between your couple?
The woman.
Yeah.
She also wears the pants.
Yeah, the man, he's dependable. He bakes a lot.
I'd say in this book, Max, because he's probably a very
Yeah.
cautious driver. Like he's probably like, he does not go over the speed limit.
Okay, I would say Malta, if anyone's in the car, but if Malta's in the car, then Nimra.
Okay, last one. Who goes to bed first? Who's sleepier?
Malta, because she's an eldest daughter.
For sure.
Yeah, because Charlie's I'm reading.
Max. Yeah, he's not made for this. He's dead. So it's 10 o'clock, we are going to bed. Yeah.
Sanos is gonna go to bed first.
And I love that.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a couple audience questions. Does anyone have a question for our authors? Yeah, hi.
Ms. Broadbent, you mentioned in particular the idea of a hero killing a heroine's father and that being sort of an obstacle to them getting together. They would find it fun to try to get around. Just personally, in terms of what all of you read or write, is there anything that you consider unforgivable? Like a complete barrier to people getting together because it's too much of a
100%. Sorry. Rape. I was gonna say we don't make the rapist a love interest. Never.
I will never have that in one of my books.
Ever. Disgusting part.
Even the non-cousins. But like especially on
Yeah, there definitely are stuff that you can't. Yeah. I mean, I can think of so many. No, yeah, there's a lot. And then even in fantasy, there's kind of more room to like explore like really larger than life situations that would never be something that you can explore in real life. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of doors that I felt like we couldn't go past. And there are some, even in non-romantic situations, like in this series in particular, there was definitely some questions that I struggled with later in the series about certain characters and what their arc should be, because I felt like, as a storyteller, especially in fantasy, you're always struggling with like giving characters endings that they deserve, but also people don't always get what they deserve in either direction, in a good way or a bad way. And then what is the difference between you narratively rewarding terrible actions, you know, as an author, but then also like you're writing something that is not real life. So it's always challenging. I definitely have struggled with it a lot in some of my books.
I also wouldn't forgive somebody reading somebody else's diary. I think that's just really
Amazing. I will take note of that, Sarah. Cheating is a no-no for me. As soon as someone cheats, I'm out. Has anyone seen like Vikings or like Poldark? As soon as the guy cheats, no, I'm done. Don't want to follow your story anymore. I'm out.
I would also like to amend, I'm not against like anything being explored in relationships, especially if you're writing in a dark fantasy or horror or like the gothic or anything that allows for exploration of that. But if I'm writing a relationship dynamic that's going to have an HEA that I want people to ship, those are the things that I would not write in.
Anybody else? Yeah, I saw him right here.
Hi. I'm really loud so everyone can hear me. I see sometimes on Book Talk, or Book Talk on Instagram, because I'm 32, so I don't have resonates, yeah. But I see sometimes people talking about how book talk and like books should not be political, and I was wondering if you guys, because I have a whole thing, I have like a whole spiel. I'm trying to make like a little PowerPoint for our friends who don't read Romantasy. What you guys think about, you know, Romantasy and the politicalness of it?
I mean, are we all writing about political intrigue in one way or another in our books too?
Even I am, honestly. Sea of Charms is my next one, which comes out in July, and like it is cozy fantasy. There is a friendly sea serpent and like a talking myrtle thing, and like you can track some events that were going on in the world. Like a certain event happened, and that island has more winged cats than you could shake a stick at. So yeah, it's to write unpolitical, because if you're a writer, you feel things. You feel certain ways about the world. Your worldview is gonna seep into the book, and it should. It should. You should let it come through, the things that you're passionate about, because that's what makes a story sing. So yeah, even in my jam-filled cinnamon roll world, I am absolutely writing politics.
Well, every fantasy world is a response to the world. Like a world that is not, a fantasy story that is not political in any way would just be the most sterile, boring world, you know? Like you're creating a world that has things happening. It would be like the most boring book in the world. You know, like I think all books, all storytelling, frankly, is inherently political in some way.
Yeah, I think
Thank you. That's the one time anyone has ever said that to me.
I think also the fantasy genre itself has known to have been reflections of society since like the creation of the fantasy genre. That's like inherent in the genre. If you ever take like a fantasy class, that's like what gets talked about. But yeah, also that writers, like the books just don't get created, writers are behind them, and especially if you're reading diversely, which you should be, the writers who are working on these books are very impacted by the world around them. And I think that it's ignorant to say that there's no politics in art, because art has been the thing for decades and decades and centuries and centuries. That's been a reflection of politics. Even if you go back, to like some of the most famous art that we study in class, like romantic art was a direct reflection of what was going on in the world. All the classics that we love, Dracula, Frankenstein, these are all reflections of what was happening in the world in like industrialization, and we are real people, and that's why AI will never be able to do this. And yeah, it's like so important. I'm obviously not very passionate about this.
That was
topic.
such a good question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Please take another question. I don't.
Right here. Hi.
Hi, I have a question for all of you, and that is basically, are most of your books settled with patriarchies or matriarchies? And do you one or the other, or do you both? Is there a reason for it, i.e., the women in your books are trying to fighting against the patriarchy, or the men in your books are trying to find their position within a matriarchy?
I know you said the question was for everyone, but I feel like it's for me, so I'm gonna go first. So I wrote we were calling it a matriarchal dystopia. Because I wrote basically patriarchy but a matriarchy, and it was a way to show our world in a different light by writing everything awful that's ever happened to women but making it happen to men instead. So in my book, men cannot hold their own property, any money they earn belongs to their wives, men are the only one punished for infidelity, etc., etc. And I did this because we are in a political time where it feels like women's rights are going backwards, and I was so furious. So furious. And so every single time something bad happened to me, I would put it in the book, but I'd make it happen to men instead. And anybody who comes into my signing line, the thing that I write in this book is, see how they like it. Because it's just a way to be like, are you for real? Like, how would you feel if this was happening to you? They're so removed from it, like they don't even realize it. So yes, I did write a matriarchy, but I took it too far. I took it too far. Not because I think it's the way the world should run. If you read my author's note, I'm very clear about my intent behind the book, but because people seem to just notice it better and seem to understand better when things are happening to men that are bad instead of women, because we are so used to the oppression of women that we don't even recognize it in the books we read anymore. And that was something very important to me and is a theme throughout the entire story.
I chose very deliberately to write a world where men and women are equal, and where people get to choose.
We need that too. So much of that.
To choose who they are, to choose who they love, and it just be fun. Be fine with everyone. The books I wrote shortly before the Cozy Fantasies were epic fantasy, and I do kill off. There's a lot of tension in those. I had to write an apology letter to all the characters I killed after the first one. They're about bloodthirsty nature spirits and the queens that can control them. And I deliberately also set out to be a world where everyone was equal and everyone could love whoever they love. And the surprising number of people that describe it as a matriarchal society makes me sad. But yeah, I like to create a world where it's what I want it to be.
I find it to be a fun lever to mess with when I'm trying to make within a very big world, when I'm trying to make different cultures and different kingdoms seem distinct from each other, which is something I try really, really hard to do, particularly in my Crowns of Nyaxia series, because the world is so big. So even things like different vampire houses have different degrees of sexism, basically. Like, some of them are very, you know, it's really a non-issue, and some of them are like quite sexist. Because it's another way of just trying to figure out like what that distinct place is going to feel like, and the things that are top of mind for those people who live there.
My book was based on patriarchy. I was inspired a lot to write about like ethno-nationalism and as a direct reflection of the ethno-nationalism and religious nationalism we're experiencing in our world. And going back to that like I'm angry thing, that's where that came from.
Let's take, maybe we can squeeze in 2 more. So let's go 1, 2. Yeah.
Is there I know you mentioned wanting to write horror. Is there like a genre or a subgenre that's like further out of your comfort zone that you'd be interested in writing one day?
I want to write steampunk, but they won't let me. Everyone's convinced that nobody likes steampunk, and I'm like, how many times do I have to pitch a steampunk? Steampunk is in.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. I will take the poll back to my publisher and try again. Thank you.
I am firmly in my cozy era right now, so I'm happy.
I really want to write like something more sci-fi, like more, but I don't even feel like that's like outside of my wheelhouse. Like, it would be like really outside of my wheelhouse if I were to be like going to write something that takes place in our world in which I have to like do research and follow the rules and stuff. Right. Yeah.
That's literally why I don't write in the real world. I hate research.
I can't. I just
Hate it.
make up my own rules. I get to make everything up. It's fantastic. So if I were to sit down and be like, I'm gonna write historical fiction, like that's when you're like, blink twice if you need help.
See, I love research. I'm just not good at making the dog not talk.
Yeah, I really want to write like the most disgusting, spine-chilling horror.
10 out of 10.
Cannibalism.
Do it.
Incest. Like I want it. I want to do it.
I'm so
Get
not
it.
writing that.
And I want to give it to Sarah.
No. Sarah will blurb it. Sarah will blurb it.
Sarah's live reaction.
The opposite of everything I want is Sarah's blurb.
I had someone who, yes.
With regards to world building, how do you keep yourself organized and like remember your characters and things that they said before that you're gonna tie in later? Like what processes do you have for that?
Do I have a process?
I don't have a process. I feel very comforted by the giggles that came up to me. It's not just me. I was only recently forced to get organized in a major way with this because the Crowns of Nyaxia world in particular, like this is an 8-book series. Too many fucking books, guys. Never again. I now use something called Obsidian, which apparently like game masters really like, to try to organize things because there's like 12 gods in all these different countries and all these different places, but it's still bad. It's still rough. There are definitely through lines that are planned from the beginning, and then sometimes there are certain like world building doors that I kind of prop open a little bit, and I'll be like, something in this realm is behind here, and I'll leave those for myself later. And then I also rely heavily on like other people, like my assistant, to read a draft and be like, you contradicted this rule in book 3. Like, you need to get your shit together, Carissa, which quote for quote what she'll say to me.
That's so funny. I love that. I do a lot of revisions, like many passes, but very quick, and I always do like a pass, what I call my stage manager pass, where I'm like making sure all the props are in place and like all the things like make sense. Somebody goes through that door, they come through another door, and then I also do a mommy pass where I make sure everybody's eaten, slept, and gone to the bathroom. So I should have a better system.
Like literally, or do those stand in for something else?
No.
So like you actually make sure people eat. That's not like
I worry on epic fantasy because I get
Just
peckish.
checking.
So like I don't have the bathroom scenes on screen, but I need to leave time because otherwise I'm going to worry about it.
I support this so well. I think that this is a great idea. Nobody should shame you for this.
Okay.
Also, can we also just make sure that like in our heads, like after a sex scene, everyone's peeing after sex. Even if it's not on page, like all of my heroines pee after sex. Like we don't mess around with urinary bladder.
I just had her pee. It's okay to have her pee too.
That doesn't come up in a cozy family.
Amazing. I read in Scrivener, which I highly recommend as a great way to have all your writing and all your research in the same place, in the same document, and then you don't have to worry about it.
I have lots of random post-its all over my desk too, some of which are like, no mermaids, and I'm like, why not? Why can't I do it? I need a system.
I have a lot of trust in my head. Ability to organize things, which doesn't work out as much as I would like.
Just give it a few more books.
Well, and I also use Scrivener, which I think helps not so much on like remembering. I think for me, I always struggle with timelines, like when things happen.
Oh, I had a sunset that lasted 50 pages once. I really like sunsets.
No, exactly. But in terms of like organizing the world so that like that exists in my head, but then like the details, like I brought out a calculator the other day to try to I was doing like genealogy. I was like, so 50 years ago it would be this person's great grandparent twice removed. And that's where I feel like writing in Scrivener really helps.
Yeah. A lot of the one thing you need to be a writer is like total unearned confidence in your own subconscious.
That's so true.
Okay, sadly, that is all the time we have. I'm obsessed with all of you. This was such an honor for me to do this. Thank you all so much. And get your books signed. Buy all their books.